Hey, Spyro fans, it's Tom Kenny, the voice of Spyro the Dragon. Come on, Sparks, we're gonna go to Dragon Shores. And you're already a Spyro fan because you are hanging out with Miharu the Fox on YouTube. Hey, Miharu, thanks for keeping Spyro alive.
Hey guys, it's Miharu. For all the time I've put into discussing and analyzing the other characters in the Spyro series, I realize I've neglected to talk much about Spyro himself. And the reason for that is honestly quite a simple one. You see, Spyro doesn't really play that significant of a role in terms of story. Aside from maybe the first game, which hints at some sort of destiny, so little of each game's plot actually revolves around him. I've described him in the past as being a bystander, a blank slate for the player to put themselves in the position of. And while that's understandable, as the main focus was always on gameplay, I sometimes feel that he's treated as an afterthought. But that's not to say he has nothing going for him. Spyro is, after all, a video game mascot from the late 90s and a dragon. So what's the one aspect Insomniac could have emphasized to make him more appealing to kids at the time? A little bit of edge.
Dragons can fly, they can run, they can flame, they can jump, they can do anything, and they're cool.
Yes, it was his personality that truly made him a memorable character. He may be small and cute, but he's also courageous and possesses a genuine sense of adventure. The very definition of big things come in small packages. And then the Reignited Trilogy came along, and at first, it seemed like we'd gotten everything we'd ever wanted. Spyro looked amazing, Tom Kenny was reprising his role. It was pure nostalgia. Our boy was back. How could they possibly screw him up?
The model, I love their model. People will be mad to hear this. I like him better than our original Spyro.
Before I discuss what fell short, I like to start with positives. And if that wasn't proof enough that Toys for Bob absolutely nailed the design, I don't know what is. It underwent some changes, of course, but overall remained similar. The most notable difference is the color scheme.
The only one that really bugs me is Spyro's the wrong color.
And his horns now have the ability to move slightly in order to display a range of emotions. However, what really brings Spyro to life is his playful body language, which is highly accentuated and reignited. Toys for Bob collaborated closely with Insomniac to ensure that Spyro's nuances and expressions were captured accurately. According to a statement in the art book by Josh Nadelberg, he's like a puppy who feels like he can go out and do what the big dogs do. And this sentiment is reflected well in his animations.
What's great is that you guys really understand who Spyro is. I mean, I think that's at the core what matters. And as a result, the animators can bring his personality, make it even more obvious.
I have no doubt the team spent countless hours observing reference footage in order to ensure his personality stayed faithful, but here's the question. Which part of it did they make obvious?
Hey Miharu, this is Carlos Alazraki. I just wanted to say, watch out for Nasty Norg, and all the Spyros are cool. Alright, take care.
Voice acting, my favorite thing to critique. Before we begin, it is worth noting that over 5 different actors, such as Jess Harnell in A Hero's Tale and Elijah Wood in the Legend series, have taken on the role of Spyro throughout the years. However, for the sake of keeping things simple, I'll be sticking to the original trilogy and the reignited version. When discussing the voice acting, we need to consider that there are 2 separate comparisons to be made. The first is Carlos Alazraki versus Tom Kenny, both from 1998 to 99, and from 98 to 2018.
He was like really young and had Lionel up in the nose, and then he was like really cooler and older. Then we just kind of did a mixture in between the two, where it's kind of like he's really kind of a go-getter kind of guy and kind of tough, but really kind of nice.
When you think of Spyro's voice in the first game, what words come to mind? Okay, I suppose that's to be expected. Get out of here with that. We are past the days of dunking on Carlos's performance. And what do you mean, unfitting? It was the first interpretation, so it was exactly what it needed to be. It captured the mischievous and playful nature of the character perfectly. The nasally tone added a unique charm, and it's just as important to acknowledge this portrayal and appreciate what Carlos brought to the role. As would happen with Ratchet from the Ratchet & Clank series, Spyro was initially portrayed as a lot more snarky than he would be in the sequels. But that's not to say he didn't still retain his fiery attitude after Tom took over. These commercials are proof enough of that.
Now that's my idea of fun. Happy holidays, fat boy. That's gotta hurt.
However, in Reignited, this would be cleaned up a bit in favor of a more sympathetic and softer take. Which brings me to our second comparison, Tom Kenny versus himself, 1999 to 2018. At San Diego Comic-Con's Reigniting a Legend panel, Tom Kenny provided insight into his interpretation of the character and his approach to delivering lines.
Spyro is all attitude, and I remember at the time thinking the hardest thing was you want to give him that brash confidence, where he's ready to rumble and he's adventurous, but you don't want him to be a jerk, you know what I mean? Like, that was the hardest thing was keeping him likable.
He clearly understands what Spyro is all about, and if there's one thing he gets absolutely perfect in this performance, it's his enthusiasm. But in not wanting some of these deliveries to come across as too harsh, they end up not being as effective in the final product. His portrayal of Spyro in this remake makes him appear more amiable and friendly when interacting with certain characters.
I was born to glide.
Who are you again?
I'm out of here. How about charge them and flame them? We are dragons after all.
Even his very first line emphasizes his spunk over his determination.
Looks like I've got some things to do.
Interestingly, both Insomniac and Toys for Bob shared concerns about him potentially being perceived as too mean-spirited.
That he was like really cooler and older, and they actually recorded something like that, but then they found out he was too mean.
As previously mentioned, the repercussions of a character's personality being handled this way were very evident in Ratchet's case. And it was these worries that prompted Toys for Bob to make the decisions that ultimately altered Spyro's characterization. To be fair, there was an attempt to bring him back to Carlos's interpretation when Jess took over for A Hero's Tale, but with an 18-year gap between Year of the Dragon and Reignited, Toys for Bob was faced with the same challenge all over again of finding the balance between naughty and nice, a task that required careful consideration and skillful execution to ensure that the character resonated with both old and new fans alike. Despite his very minimal inclusion in the storytelling though, there might be more to our titular hero than we give him credit for. So, whereas you may have heard a scratchy, childish, go-getter voice in the first game, taking the time to actually listen to what he's saying and how he says it reveals aspects of his personality one might not be aware of. Let's compare some cutscenes so you can hear for yourself the differences in the way the dialogue is delivered and how that ends up affecting Spyro's overall character.
Yeah, well, you could have found an easier spot to get stuck.
With treetops being one of the first levels shown off, this one stuck out to me immediately. Everyone knows the struggle of rescuing Jed. Players have gotten countless game overs trying to string these supercharges perfectly. So when you finally reach him, and maybe it's just me, but Spyro sounds pissed off. And rightfully so. Dude, I just wasted all my lives trying to get up here. But then, in Reignited,
Yeah, well, you could have found an easier spot to get stuck.
coupled with that face, it sounds more like he's lecturing him. Like, nah man, I'm not mad, but I am gonna give you a light scolding. Sure, it's not Jed's fault, but this reaction just doesn't line up with the frustration we were feeling at that moment.
Any advice before this battle?
This is a really interesting example because it's the first instance we get of Spyro seeming genuinely nervous about something. Up until this point, it's been, what should I be afraid of? And bring 'em on! And
Supercharge? Excellent.
I mean, he doesn't even bat an eye at the enemies carrying guns later on. But for Jacques, he doesn't quite know what to think. And although it could be interpreted as him seeing the boss fight as a joke, with the air quotes around battle, I've always seen it as the former. The fact that he would even ask Revealo for advice at all is telling. Then in the remake, it's
Any advice before this battle?
just a question. No pause, nothing to seem unsure about. He's just smiling and ready to go. And you might be thinking, well, yeah, what's he got to be afraid of? Which brings me to this comparison from all the way back in Artisans.
Afraid of what?
Falling from high mountain peaks? Plummeting into prehistoric glaciers?
Oh, that.
Look at his face when Tomas brings up the possibility of falling and crashing. He's nervous, which makes sense. But in the original,
Afraid of what?
Falling from high mountain peaks? Plummeting into prehistoric glaciers?
Oh, that.
did you hear that? That little intrusive chuckle? This is what makes his later interaction with Revealo so notable, because as I mentioned earlier, Spyro in this game is a daredevil. He could care less about messing up a glide as long as he gets to toast Nasty Nork in the end. Now we'll look at some scenes from the sequels. Moving back into the direct comparisons between Tom Kenny's two performances, some people say they saw major improvement here in Reignited, particularly in the way Spyro interacts with Elora. They'll say Tom's original take made him sound too generic and aloof, that he lacked the personality Carlos gave him. But the way I see it, and what I think many people fail to realize, is that Spyro was thrown into the Avalar situation against his will. All he wanted was a vacation, some time to relax, and now he's being asked to help deal with a threat to a world he didn't even know existed. He's tired, and his voice reflects that. Just listen to the way he says this.
Okay, no problem. I'll collect a few talismans, give Ripto the old hot foot, and be in Dragon Shores by lunchtime.
Kinda gives the impression that he wants to get this over with ASAP, right? Not that he doesn't care, he just thinks he's earned a rest and is convincing himself that the job won't take long.
Okay, no problem. I'll collect a few talismans, give Ripto the old hot foot, and be in Dragon Shores by lunchtime.
Here, you can clearly see that he's a lot more understanding of the situation and is determined to help out. So when he talks about defeating Ripto here, that reassurance comes across as if it's directed at Elora rather than himself. But his actions speak as loudly as his words. Due to the restrictions of the PS1 models, he doesn't really emote when Elora kisses him at the end of Spyro 2. However, in Reignited, he visibly lights up in response to her gesture, only for him to later say this in the next game.
Another noble warrior falls victim to the plague of love. Just look away.
So what is the truth? And Toys for Bob even went a step beyond by incorporating this subtle detail of Spyro wrapping his wing around Elora as she joins him to watch the fireworks. Year of the Dragon is my favorite of the three games for its tone and atmosphere, but that mood is all but completely non-existent in the remake, and cutscenes like the following are partly the reason why. I already talked about the problems I have with Sheila herself in this scene, but the way Spyro acts is also worth noting. First, this line.
Is that why some of the portals don't work? Is that why some of the portals don't work?
Just like with Elora, one is directed at himself, the other at her. Then take a look at this. That zoom in, which is only present in this version, is a visual indication of Spyro trying to piece together what he just learned. It's details like these that, when removed, take away the air of mystery this game had. But Sheila isn't the only critter he reacts differently to.
Well, the rumors of our extinction were slightly exaggerated. We just wanted a little peace and quiet.
In the original, there's a hint of cynicism in his response to Sergeant Bird's assumption, like he's annoyed that anyone could even surmise that his species had died out.
Well, the rumors of our extinction were slightly exaggerated. We just wanted a little peace and quiet.
In Reignited, he's not as defensive about it, that sarcasm replaced with a more sincere answer. I can definitely understand why one might think these line deliveries make Spyro appear somewhat disconnected to the world around him, but those small touches are what gave insight into how he viewed various situations and characters. Each version of Spyro that I've mentioned thus far brought something to the table. The very first one with his quirky charm and impish nature, the revision with his more laid-back tone and sarcastic remarks, and then Reignited, which amped up his enthusiastic side more than ever before. However, while the latter did present us with a fresh take on our beloved dragon, I can't help but feel that it missed the mark in terms of really enhancing his essence. True, the remake did attempt to capture the blend of sass and sincerity that made Spyro so endearing, but ended up doing so in a way where it feels lacking in authenticity. The witty remarks and snarky comebacks that were once effortlessly woven into Spyro's dialogue don't seem as natural this time around. Much like in Bianca's case, this was a matter of, if you change the inflection, it changes the meaning. Spyro the Dragon was definitely a product of its time, a reflection of carefree 90s spirit, something that's nearly impossible to recreate in the world we live in now. And as much as I appreciate Reignited for their depiction of him, there will always be a piece missing. But what do you think? Do you see these alterations as a sign of personal growth for the character? Or has the more optimistic outlook done more harm than good? And how do you think this could affect his portrayal going forward? Thank you so much for watching, guys, and happy 5th anniversary to the Reignited Trilogy. As always, don't forget to subscribe for more casual gaming content, and I will see you next time. Until then, this is Miharu, signing off.